Hi there, it's Karolyn Loncon, and I'm here to share a fun little fold card that has this great little fitted flap that I thought would be really fun to show you guys how to make today. The products that I'm using today are the stitched square frames from My Favorite Things, the Bold Blooms stamp set by Essentials by Ellen, and the coordinating Bold Blossoms dies by Essentials by Ellen. Okay, I started off with a 4 1/4 by 8 1/2 by 11 piece of the white linen cardstock by Essentials by Ellen, and I scored it at 3 1/4, and then I put it back in, the crease side in, and scored it again at 5 1/2 with my mini scoreboard. Next, I'm using the stitched square frames for My Favorite Things and an A2 size piece of the white linen cardstock again. And I'm going to die cut that twice, running it through my Big Shot and using the magnetic platform. I'm going to use the stitched square frames again to die cut a piece of the black and white polka dot paper from the brand new My Favorite Things Dots and Stripes neutral pad. I'm going to run that through my Big Shot just the way I did with the white linen paper. Now you'll see that I'm going to adhere the frame to the card base. I'm going to attach the frame side of it, the stitched frame, first, the black and white polka dot stitch frame, first to one of the white linen frames that I already die cut. And then I'm going to put adhesive on 1/2 of the square, on the back of 1/2 of the square, and attach that to the short scored side of the card base, kind of centering it and angling that frame so that the points are aligned with the edge of the card base. To finish off the inside of that polka dot frame, I'm going to just add one of the white linen frames to the inside, kind of aligning it exactly how it is on the front, but it'll look finished on the inside. Then I'm going to take the squares that were created when I die cut the stitch frames, and I'm going to add those to the other side of the card, basically mimicking what I did with the frames. So putting adhesive on 1/2 of the square and adhering it to the other side of the card, but kind of fitting it inside of that frame so that it's positioned perfectly. And then I'm using my little adhesive eraser there just to make sure I get all the adhesive off the front. And I'll put adhesive on the entire back of the other one to again finish off the inside of the card. Next, I'm going to create a panel from some Solar White smooth Nina cardstock, and I'm going to blend a few of the distress inks, starting out here with the mustard seed and one of the mini ink blenders, the round ink blenders that I love to work with, and some picked raspberry. I think that the way that these two colors blend together is amazing, and I thought it would be perfect for the rose. And I'll use this ink blended panel to die cut the blossoms, the rose blossom, and then I'll create another one for the leaves. So yeah, again, I'm ink blending, starting out with the mustard seed and then moving on to the picked raspberry and kind of going in a circular motion and creating a circle of color also, because I wanted to make sure that it looked as though it was more realistic in a round pattern rather than a straight pattern. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on another Solar White panel, starting with mustard seed, blending it pretty vibrantly and blending it in a line this time rather than in a circle. And again, I'm laying down a pretty heavy layer of this mustard seed ink, and then I'm going to grab some peacock feathers and blend that with the mustard seed, because it blends to make a most beautiful green color with just a hint of turquoise, which I thought would be perfect for the leaves of the blossoms. I'm using the Bold Blossoms dies to create the rose bloom as well as the leaves. And you'll see I'm pulling them off the sheet here. And I'm going to lay the rose down onto the ink blended rose colored panel that I created blending the inks. And I'm going to run that through my Big Shot, die cut it. And then I'll run the leaves using the green panel that I created through my Big Shot as well. I just kind of position them on there so that they have a variation in color, and run them through the Big Shot, and then they'll be ready to go. Okay, now it's time to stamp the sentiment. So I'm going to use the Bold Bloom stamp set by Essentials by Ellen. This is a great stamp set. I'm going to use that Oh Happy Day sentiment, and I'm just aligning it on the card panel and then adhering it to my Martha Stewart stamp press. And I'm going to use the Onyx Black VersaFine ink because it's a pigment ink, so it actually stays wet long enough to heat emboss it. So I really like this ink. It's a good clean ink, and it's really, really dark. And I like the fact that I can stamp it in black and then heat emboss it in clear. So here I'm stamping it onto the card panel and kind of positioning it, which I love. One of the things I love about those Martha Stewart stamp presses is that I can position it, sort of hover over where I want to stamp it, and then press it down to stamp. So I'm getting ready to heat emboss it. Here I've got a piece of scratch paper that I've folded in half, and I'm going to put the panel inside there and sprinkle on my favorite clear embossing powder onto the sentiment and tap it off, and then just make sure that it's covered really, really well. And then I'm grabbing my heat tool and I'm going to heat emboss it. And normally I would put this on a board just to keep it flat, but this seemed to stay pretty flat, which actually made me happy. I hate it when they curve from heat embossing. So once that's done, it's on to the next step. Okay, after looking at how vibrant and how dark the black sentiment was, I felt like the black and white polka dot paper wasn't quite as dark. So I die cut another stitch frame from the black and white polka dot paper, and now I'm covering it with Versamark, and then I'm going to cover it with more of the clear embossing powder. And what that does is it actually intensifies the color of the paper, the pattern paper, and it will match better with the sentiment. So I covered it with the clear embossing powder, and now I'm heat embossing it with my heat tool. And I actually do this twice to just kind of give it a really good layer. And it makes for this really fun, glossy little frame that kind of adds some fun little interest and dimension that's sort of unusual and unexpected. Okay, so I'm just going to add some adhesive to the back of the glossy frame, and I'll just adhere it right on top of the other frame. I could have disassembled the whole thing, but honestly, this is just as easy, and it only wasted just one little frame, so it wasn't a big deal, and I really, really like the way that it looks next to the embossed sentiment and how it really kind of makes that color pop a lot better. Now I'm adding foam adhesive in small little bits to the back of the rose as well as to the back of the leaves. And I'm going to just cut some little teeny tiny pieces of that Scotch adhesive foam tape and adhere it just to some of the small spaces. I actually want to leave a space where the leaves are going to stick to the card base underneath the rose, but this will give the rose a little bit of dimension. And then peeling off the release tape, and I'm just going to adhere it to the inside square of the frame. And again, positioning the one end of the rose that doesn't have any dimensional tape and sliding those leaves underneath. They also have dimensional tape on them. And you'll see here I'm pulling off the release tape, and then I realize there's a piece of foam tape on there that's getting in the way. So I just pull that off and stick those on. And then lastly, I'm adding some enamel dots from Doodlebug, the Beetle Black, I think they're called, just to kind of add some interest and attention to detail. Just those little details kind of actually make the difference between finishing a card and not finishing a card. And I love the enamel dots. They kind of go with the embossed frame as well as the embossed sentiment and just kind of add that extra little detail. So there you have it, that fun little fold card. Thanks so much for joining me in the classroom today. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I also hope that you'll give it a try. It's actually really, really fun to create.